Jace Raylan was not a hero. He was a scavenger, plain and simple. He flew alone in his small ship, the Starren, searching for abandoned vessels floating in deep space. Some called it junk work, but Jace called it survival. That day, his sensors picked up a strange signal near the edge of the Taraxis expanse, a place most avoided. It was filled with dust clouds, forgotten ships, and dead signals. But what he found was different. A massive Iliari vessel, half destroyed, floated in silence. Iliari ships were known for their beauty, long, curved structures with glowing crystal veins. But this one was scared. The back half was gone, like it had been sliced clean. No signs of life, no signals, just quiet. Jace docked his ship carefully. He wore his pressure suit and carried a hand scanner. As he entered the derelict ship, the air inside was thin but breathable. Lights flickered. Broken panels hung like metal vines. It was like walking through a ghost's dream. He checked room after room, engineering, storage, even a shattered medbay. All empty. Then he heard something. A soft sound. Not a machine. Not a warning siren. It was crying. Jace followed it, step by slow step, until he reached a sealed door. His scanner showed pressure on the other side. With a hiss, the door opened, and he stepped into a small chamber. The room was dim, but warm. She sat in the middle of the floor. Tall, elegant, with pale silver skin and eyes like glowing ice, the Iliari woman didn't even look up. She wore a torn robe, and her long hair hung loose. Her face was wet with clear, shining tears. Tears that formed small crystals when they touched the ground. She just kept crying. Jace froze. He'd seen many strange things in space, but never this. An Iliari, alive, alone, crying. He spoke gently. "Hey, are you okay? Can you understand me?" No answer. He moved closer, slowly, showing he meant no harm. The woman didn't flinch or speak. She just stared at the floor, tears falling one after another. Jace checked her for wounds, but there were none. She was breathing. Her body wasn't injured. It was something else. Something inside. He reached for his portable translator. It wasn't strong, but maybe it could help. He activated it and tried again. "Do you understand me? I'm not here to hurt you." She blinked once. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came, just more tears. Jace sighed and sat on the floor nearby, giving her space. "Okay," he said softly. "You don't have to talk now, but I'll stay. You're not alone." He stayed there for an hour, then 2. The woman never moved, never stopped crying. Finally, Jace stood up and left the room, searching for supplies. He found a power cell and reconnected a few systems. The lights got brighter. The air got cleaner. A bit of warmth returned to the room. He brought her water, not sure if she needed it. She didn't touch it. He returned to his ship and brought a blanket and some rations. He didn't know if Iliari ate human food, but it was all he had. Each day he returned, sat with her, spoke gently. Sometimes she looked at him. Sometimes she didn't. But she was alive. That was something. On the 3rd day, Jace brought a small music player and let it play soft earth melodies. A simple tune. A piano. Something calm. For the first time, the woman closed her eyes. He didn't understand why she was crying. He didn't know what had happened to her ship or why the others were gone. But he knew one thing. He couldn't leave her. Not like this. That night, Jace sent a message to a friend on a nearby station. Just a short one. Found something strange. An Iliari woman. Alive. Ship's dead. She won't speak. Don't know what happened. Will stay until I figure it out. He didn't expect a reply soon. Communications were slow this far out. The next morning, he checked the ship again. And finally, in the navigation room, he found a memory crystal, still glowing faintly. He held it up to the light. It had the Iliary symbol for judgment. And suddenly, Jace understood one thing. This wasn't just a broken ship. This was a secret, a painful one. And whatever the alien woman had witnessed, it had broken her. Jace stared at the memory crystal in his hand. It glowed faintly, the edges smooth and cold, like it had been made for something important. But what? He didn't know enough about Iliary technology to unlock it on his own. His translator wasn't powerful enough. He looked over at the woman sitting in the corner, still lost in her silent crying. She hadn't moved in days. No words, no acknowledgement of his presence. It was like she was trapped in a world of her own pain, unable or unwilling to leave it. Jace sighed and pocketed the crystal, his mind racing. There had to be a way to help her. If only she could talk. If only she could tell him what had happened, what caused her so much grief. He decided it was time to try the translator again. He wasn't sure it would work, but he had to try. If he could get her to speak, maybe they could figure out what had happened. Maybe he could help. With a soft hum, Jace activated the translator, linking it to his wrist console. The device flickered to life, flashing an indicator that it was reading his voice patterns. It was a simple tool, but it had helped him communicate with other species in the past. He hoped it would work for her too. "Can you hear me?" Jace asked, keeping his tone gentle. He didn't want to startle her. "I'm trying to help. Please, if you can hear me, let me know." For a moment, there was only silence. Then, slowly, the woman's head lifted. Her eyes met his for the first time in days. There was a glimmer of something, pain, confusion, but also a small flicker of recognition. She wasn't completely lost to whatever had happened to her. That was a start. Jace didn't move, didn't rush. He let her take her time. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper, raw and broken. "Why? Why are you helping me?" Her voice cracked, as though each word took everything she had. I don't deserve it." Jace's heart sank. He didn't know what had happened to her, but the weight of her words, of her guilt, was heavy. She sounded like someone who had lost everything, someone who believed she had no place left to belong. "Everyone deserves help," Jace said softly. "You're not alone. I won't leave you. You're not a burden." The woman shook her head, her tears flowing once more. "You don't understand," she murmured. "I did something unforgivable. I betrayed my people." Jace took a cautious step forward, his eyes never leaving her. "Betrayed your people? Why?" She closed her eyes tightly, as though trying to block out the memories. Her body trembled slightly, as if the weight of the past was too much to bear. I warned the humans. I tried to stop them." She looked up at him, her eyes wide with shock. "I tried to warn you, but they wouldn't listen. They called me a traitor. They called me a fool." Jace's mind spun, trying to piece the puzzle together. Warn the humans? Who? And what had happened to her people to make her cry like this? "Warned us about what?" he asked gently. "What did you try to stop?" She swallowed hard, looking down at the floor. Her tears continued to fall. She seemed to be fighting with herself, struggling with the decision to speak. "I am an Iliary," she said at last, her voice barely audible. "Our people. We feared you. We feared the humans. Your kind was advancing too quickly. You were too strong, too unstoppable. We thought you would destroy us." Jace frowned, trying to understand. "What do you mean? Why would you think we'd destroy you?" "We didn't want to be taken over. We didn't want to be ruled by you," she whispered. "We feared that the humans would take control of our worlds, of our way of life." Jace took a deep breath, trying to wrap his head around her words. It was hard to believe that the Iliary, such a peaceful and advanced species, could have ever thought of humans that way. But the fear in her eyes, her pain, told him it was real. "So you tried to stop us?" Jace asked. "How?" The woman's shoulders slumped, as though the very thought drained her strength. "I was part of a mission, a secret operation. We were going to sterilize an entire sector of space to stop humanity from spreading further. She choked on the words, clearly ashamed. I didn't agree with it. I couldn't, so I tried to stop it. I warned your kind. I tried to send a message, but they found out. They branded me a traitor. I had to flee, or they would have killed me. Jace's eyes widened. A sterilization, to stop humanity's expansion. His mind raced as the full weight of her story sank in. She hadn't just been a survivor of an attack. She was a whistleblower, someone who had risked her life to save countless humans, and for that, her people had condemned her. You tried to stop them, Jace repeated, his voice thick with disbelief. But they're still out there, your people. The woman nodded, tears spilling from her eyes once more. I didn't stop them. I couldn't. And now I'm alone. My ship's destroyed. My people hate me. Jace felt a rush of sympathy for her. She wasn't just crying because of her own pain. She was crying because she had been betrayed by her own kind, for trying to do what was right. You're not alone, he said softly. Not anymore. But even as he spoke those words, Jace felt the gravity of the situation settle in. There were bigger forces at play here, forces he hadn't even begun to understand. And if her people were really trying to stop humanity's progress, Jace knew that wasn't something he could ignore. Jace couldn't stop thinking about her words. The woman, Alira, he'd learned her name, had risked everything to warn humanity. But the true weight of her actions didn't hit him until later that night when he sat alone in the cockpit of the Starin, holding the glowing memory crystal she had been clutching. It had been in her hand when he first found her, cold, untouched by the chaos around her. She had kept it close, as though it were her only connection to a life she couldn't return to. Jace set the crystal down on his dashboard, examining it carefully. The Eliari language was like a beautiful puzzle, but he knew he couldn't decipher it on his own. The ship's old, barely functional systems had their limitations, and his translator couldn't help with something as complex as this. He tapped into the small data interface on the dashboard and connected the crystal to the system. The screen blinked to life with a soft hum, displaying alien symbols Jace couldn't read. But there was something else, a faint image forming in the background. His fingers hesitated over the control panel. Whatever was on this crystal, it was important. He could feel it. He pressed a button to initiate the data extraction. The screen flickered, and suddenly, the image became clearer. It was a recording. Alira, standing tall and proud in the heart of an Eliari council room. Her expression was fierce, determined, different from the broken woman who sat across from him now. She wore a formal robe, her long silver hair flowing around her shoulders. She was speaking to a group of Eliari leaders, and although Jace couldn't understand the words, the intensity of her voice was clear. You must listen to me, Alira said in the recording, her voice full of emotion. This is not the right path. We cannot destroy a whole sector to stop humans from advancing. We must learn from them, not fight them. The scene shifted, showing faces of Eliari elders, their expressions stern and cold. Some were nodding in agreement, but others were shaking their heads, whispering to each other. The tension in the room was palpable. Jace could almost feel the weight of the decision hanging in the air. The humans cannot be trusted, one of the leaders said, his voice deep and commanding. They are growing too fast. Their expansion threatens us all. Another leader, an elderly woman with sharp silver eyes, spoke next. Their technology is dangerous. We must stop them before it's too late. If they reach our borders, there will be no turning back. Alira's face hardened. We cannot destroy them because of fear. We must find another way. We can't sink to the level of those who seek to dominate. Humanity may be flawed, but they are not our enemy. The room grew silent. Alira's words had left a mark. But the council wasn't convinced. The footage continued, showing Alira being led away, her hands bound. Her eyes were defiant, but there was no denying that she had been outnumbered. She had tried to stop them, but in the end, her people had turned against her. Jace watched, unable to look away. The vision on the screen continued to play out, showing her escape, fleeing the council, escaping to the nearest star system. It wasn't much, but it was enough to show Jace that Alira hadn't just been a victim. She had been a hero. The footage ended abruptly, leaving Jace staring at the blank screen. He ran his fingers through his hair, his thoughts racing. Alira had warned them. She had tried to save humanity from a terrible fate, but her people hadn't listened, and now she was alone, hunted by those she had once called her own. Jace thought about the ship, the one he had found her on. It had been destroyed, but there was still so much left to learn. Whoever had attacked it hadn't just destroyed the ship. They had attacked Alira, her message, and her will to protect humanity. It wasn't just a random act of violence. It was part of something bigger. His mind raced. If there were others who thought like Alira's people, if there were those still planning to stop humanity's progress, it was a problem that couldn't be ignored. Jace turned in his seat to look at the woman who had shared so much with him already. Alira was sitting on the floor in the corner, her knees drawn up to her chest. She was staring out of the small window at the endless blackness of space. She hadn't moved much since the conversation began, and her tears were still flowing. It hurt him to see her like this, broken and alone. She had done what she thought was right, only to be betrayed by the very people she had trusted. He couldn't imagine how it felt to be in her position, fighting for something, risking everything, and ending up with nothing. Jace's voice was soft as he spoke to her. "I know it's hard, but you don't have to carry this alone anymore. I promise I'll help. You've already done so much for humanity. I won't let you be forgotten." Alira didn't reply, but she glanced at him for a brief moment. It was a look that spoke volumes, thankfulness, regret, and a deep, unspoken sadness. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "I didn't just risk my life to warn your kind," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "I risked everything. I lost my family, my home, my future, all for a chance that humanity could be better. But I failed." Jace shook his head, standing up from his seat. "You didn't fail. You're here, and that means there's still hope. We can stop this. We can warn others, fight back if we have to." Alira's expression softened, and for the first time in days, Jace saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make him believe that together, they could make a difference. "We'll find a way," he said with determination. "And you won't be alone. Not ever again." Jace hadn't expected it to happen so soon. But there it was, the warning on his ship's radar. An incoming vessel, fast and quiet. Too quiet. It was a stealth ship, one that blended into the stars like a shadow, almost impossible to detect. Jace had learned to recognize the signs after years of scavenging in deep space. The Eliari were coming for them. He glanced over at Alira, who was still sitting in the corner, staring out into the vast emptiness of space. Her tears had dried, but her sadness remained. There was a heaviness about her now, a quiet dread that hadn't been there before. She knew what was coming. "They found us," Jace said softly, as he began to prepare the ship for what was to come. "The ones who chased you. They tracked us here." Alira's eyes slowly shifted toward him, her expression a mixture of fear and resignation. She stood up slowly, her movements stiff, and made her way toward the navigation panel. "They won't stop until I'm gone," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They'll destroy this ship, and anyone who's with me." Jace clenched his jaw, trying to fight down the surge of anger rising inside him. This wasn't just about survival now. This was about protecting her, about making sure she didn't face this alone. "We'll fight," he said, his voice firm. "I'm not leaving you. I've survived worse, and I'm not running away from this." Alira looked at him, her gaze softening, though there was a flicker of fear in her eyes. "You don't understand. They're not just hunters. They're soldiers, trained for this. They'll board the ship, and they'll take me back. Or worse, they'll kill us both." Jace took a deep breath, activating the ship's defense systems. He didn't care how dangerous they were. He wasn't going to let them take her. Not without a fight. "I don't care who they are," he said. "I'm not letting them get you. We're not running. Not today." As if to challenge his resolve, a sharp alarm blared on the ship's console, confirming what he already knew. The stealth ship was close, too close. It was already within striking distance. Jace moved quickly to the control panel, his fingers flying over the keys as he rerouted power to the ship's shields and weapon systems. The ship shuddered as the energy surged through it. He could feel the weight of the decision in his chest. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about them. Alyra and him, and whatever future they could carve out together. He didn't reply right away. He had already made up his mind. They'd had no choice before, but now they did. They could fight. The alarms began to blare, signaling that the shields were dangerously low. A series of red warnings flashed across Jace's screen, telling him the Starren could only withstand one more hit before the shields would fail completely. "We're not giving up," Jace said firmly. He punched in a series of commands on the console. The ship's engines roared to life, pushing them forward at full speed. He gritted his teeth as the ship lurched forward, tearing away from the attacking vessel. The enemy ship fired again, but Jace had already made his move. The Starren swerved out of the line of fire just in time. The blast missed, but it was too close. Alyra let out a breath of relief, though it didn't last long. They couldn't keep this up forever. The Starren was fast, but not fast enough to outrun their pursuers for long. Jace slammed his fist down on a nearby switch, activating the emergency thrusters. The ship jolted as it accelerated, making a sharp turn into a nearby asteroid field. The scattered rocks provided some cover, but it wasn't enough to shake off the enemy completely. He had to think fast. "They'll follow us into the field," Alyra said, her voice tense as she watched the incoming targets on the screen. "It won't slow them down." "I know," Jace replied, his voice tight with concentration. "But it will give us time. We just need a little time to come up with a plan." The asteroid field was dense, but Jace navigated it with skill, dodging rocks and debris at breakneck speed. The enemy ship followed them into the field, staying close behind. Jace had expected this, but what he hadn't expected was how close the enemy was. They were almost on top of them. He wasn't going to outrun them forever. He needed to fight back. "Hold on," Jace shouted as he pulled the Starren into a sharp dive, narrowly avoiding a massive asteroid. He could hear the sound of the ship's hull scraping against the edge of a smaller rock. He didn't have time to check for damage. He had to keep moving. Alyra's hand shot out to steady herself, her face tense with fear. "Jace, we have to stop running. We can't keep this up." He nodded, his mind racing. She was right. They couldn't keep running forever, but there was one thing he could do. One thing that might just give them a fighting chance. "We need to take them out," he said, determination in his voice. "I'm going to fight back." Alyra's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" "They're too strong. You won't make it." Jace didn't answer. He was already moving, pulling up the weapon system and arming the ship's lasers. The asteroid field might be their only advantage. It would be difficult to hit a moving target, but Jace had always been good under pressure. He had to be now. "Ready?" Jace asked, glancing at Alyra. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Ready." Jace locked onto the enemy ship and fired. The laser blasts tore through the air, striking the enemy ship with a resounding crack. The Starren shook from the force of the blast, but the shield held, just barely. The enemy ship veered off course, but it quickly corrected, returning to its pursuit. "Nice shot," Alyra said, her voice tinged with surprise. Jace didn't have time to feel good about it. The enemy wasn't giving up. They fired again, and this time, the blast hit closer to the engine core. The Starren rattled, and Jace heard the distinct sound of metal groaning under pressure. They were losing power. "We need more speed," Jace shouted, slamming his hand on the console. The thrusters roared again, pushing the ship forward. But it wasn't enough. "Hold on," Jace shouted as he pulled up sharply, sending the ship into a spiraling climb. The enemy ship followed, but it wasn't prepared for the maneuver. The second blast hit, but it missed by inches. Alyra gasped as she held on tight to her seat. "They're getting closer." Jace didn't respond. His mind was already calculating the next move. He had to give them a reason to stop. He had to show them that they weren't going to win this fight. He turned the Starren toward a massive asteroid, larger than anything they had passed before. The field was dense with smaller rocks, but Jace knew that if he could use the bigger one as cover, it might just buy them enough time. "Get ready," Jace warned as the asteroid grew larger in their view. He made a hard turn, positioning the ship so they were hidden behind it. The enemy ship didn't stop its pursuit. It was getting closer, but Jace had one more trick left. He activated the emergency missiles. "Let's see if they can dodge this." He fired. The missiles rocketed away from the Starren, streaking through space with bright trails of light. Jace watched the enemy ship, his heart pounding in his chest. This was it. Either they would escape, or they would face the full wrath of the Ilyari hunters. There was no turning back now. The enemy ship, in hot pursuit, was trying to dodge the incoming missiles. Jace held his breath, watching as the missiles veered left and right, attempting to find a target. For a moment, it seemed like the enemy might escape, but then one missile found its mark. A powerful explosion erupted in the distance, lighting up the cold, dark expanse of space. The force of the blast sent shockwaves through the Starren, causing it to shudder violently. "We got them," Jace shouted, his voice filled with a mix of relief and exhilaration. Alyra's eyes widened in shock. She had expected this to be a lost cause, but for the first time since this nightmare had started, she saw a glimmer of hope. The enemy ship began to drift, its engines sputtering and sparking. The damage was too much for it to recover from. Jace didn't waste a second. He swung the Starren around, and with the enemy ship incapacitated, he focused on the next step of their plan. "We can't stay here," Jace said, his voice steady. "We need to warn others about what's happening. If we don't act quickly, they'll keep sending more ships after us." Alyra nodded, her expression still a mixture of relief and concern. She had been silent since the explosion, her mind racing. Even though they had won this battle, the war wasn't over. Jace quickly rerouted all remaining power to the ship's communication system. He had one chance to send out a distress signal, a message that could help stop the Ilyari from continuing their campaign to destroy humanity. His fingers flew over the console as he typed in a series of coordinates, sending a call for help to the nearest human outpost. Come on," he muttered under his breath, waiting for the transmission to connect. His hand hovered over the button. The message was simple, but it could change everything. He couldn't afford to make a mistake. The ship's computer pinged, indicating the message had been sent. But as Jace breathed a sigh of relief, the ship's sensors picked up something new. Another ship. This time, it wasn't an enemy ship. It was a friendly one. "Looks like we're not alone," Jace said with a smile. "Help's on the way." Alyra stood up from her seat, her expression unreadable. She stared at the screen, watching the new ship approach. Jace couldn't tell if she was relieved or still worried. There was so much more to their story, so much more to uncover. But for now, this moment, this small victory, was enough. As the new ship drew closer, the comms crackled to life. A voice came through, familiar and welcoming. "This is Captain Lillian Hayes of the Fury. We received your distress signal. Hold tight. We're coming in." Jace smiled. He had known that the message would get through, but hearing a friendly voice made it feel real. Alyra's shoulders seemed to relax for the first time in days. The Fury arrived, its massive frame blocking out the stars as it positioned itself next to the Starren. A docking sequence initiated, and within moments, a large bay door opened, allowing the two ships to connect. "Jace," Alira said, her voice softer now. "You did it. You saved us." He shook his head, still watching the docking procedure. "No, we did it. You're not alone anymore." Before they could even respond, the doors to the docking bay opened, and a team of humans from the Fury boarded the Starin. Captain Hayes herself led the way, her calm demeanor a sharp contrast to the chaos of the last few days. "You must be Alira," Captain Hayes said with a warm smile, extending her hand. "It's good to finally meet you. We've heard about your bravery. You don't have to run anymore." Alira hesitated for a moment before shaking the captain's hand. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice still hoarse from the emotional toll. "I never thought I'd see this day." Captain Hayes turned to Jace, giving him a grateful nod. "You did good. You both did." Jace felt a wave of exhaustion hit him as the tension slowly drained from his body. The fight wasn't over, but they had won the first round. The Eliari would no longer have the element of surprise. Humanity had a chance to prepare, to fight back. "We'll take care of you from here," Captain Hayes continued. "But there's more to this than just you. We need to know everything. The Eliari are planning something. And it's not just about you anymore. It's bigger." Jace turned to Alira. Her eyes were full of sadness, but there was something else there now. Hope. For the first time, she looked like someone who might have a future, not just someone hiding from the past. She nodded slowly. "I know, and I'll tell you everything. It's time to stop running." Jace stepped back, giving them space to talk. He knew Alira had a long journey ahead of her. They both did. But as long as they had each other, there was a chance, one that he wouldn't let slip away. As the crew from the Fury began to assess the damage to the Starin, Jace took a deep breath and looked out the window at the stars beyond. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. He didn't know what the future held, but he did know one thing. They were ready to face it together. The days following the arrival of the Fury felt like a whirlwind. The crew had worked tirelessly to make repairs on the Starin, and the constant hum of their engines was a reminder that they were still alive, still moving forward. But the truth was undeniable. The battle wasn't over. It was just beginning. Jace stood at the small observation window of the Fury's command deck, looking out at the stars. The vast emptiness of space always had a way of making him feel small, insignificant. But now, something felt different. The weight of his choices, the risks he had taken, no longer seemed like mistakes. They had led to this moment. They had given him and Alira a chance to change the future. Alira came up beside him, her presence a quiet reassurance. Her face, though still lined with the shadows of what she had endured, held a sense of purpose now. She had shared everything with the human crew, and Captain Hayes had listened intently, her eyes full of understanding and determination. The Eliari's plans were far-reaching, and the threat to humanity was very real. "Jace," Alira said softly, pulling him from his thoughts. "There's something I need to tell you, about what happened to my people, and what's coming." Jace turned to her, giving her his full attention. He had been waiting for this. They both had. Alira had shared parts of her story, but there was still so much left unsaid. He could see the conflict in her eyes, but there was also something else, an undeniable strength. She had made it this far. She was ready to face whatever came next. "I'm listening," Jace said, his voice steady. Alira took a deep breath. The Eliari. They were never just worried about humans spreading across the galaxy. It's more than that. My people were afraid of what humanity represents. You don't just expand. You evolve. You adapt. And that's something the Eliari never did. We've been stagnant, controlled by the old ways, the old rules. We stopped changing a long time ago. Jace frowned, not fully understanding. But how does that affect us? Why would they want to stop humans from growing? Because your potential scares them, Alira said, her voice barely above a whisper. You see, humanity doesn't just settle into patterns like other species. You don't cling to your past. You learn from it and grow. And the Iliari, they're afraid that if you keep evolving, you'll surpass them. They don't want to face a future where humans are stronger, smarter, and more capable than they are. Jace processed her words slowly. It was hard to imagine, to understand why a peaceful, advanced species like the Iliari would be so afraid of humans. But as Alira spoke, he began to see it. The Iliari had chosen a path of caution, of control, and now they feared change, feared the unknown. So they wanted to destroy humanity's future. Jace asked, his voice low with disbelief. Alira nodded. Yes, they believe that if they could stop humanity's spread, if they could control your growth, they could keep the galaxy in balance. They couldn't allow humans to become a threat to their existence. Jace stood silent for a moment, taking in the weight of her words. He had never thought of humanity's potential as something to be feared. But now, looking at the situation through Alira's eyes, he understood. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for the right to grow, to evolve, to change the galaxy. But why help me? Jace asked. Why risk your life to stop your own people? Alira's eyes softened, and she took a step closer to him. Because I believe in you. I believe in humanity. I had to make a choice, stay silent, and watch the galaxy fall into darkness, or take a chance and warn you. I couldn't stand by and let them destroy everything you've worked for. Jace reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder. You made the right choice. The two of them stood in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared journey settling between them. But there was still so much to do. The message had been sent, and the distress call had reached human stations across the galaxy. Now, humanity was answering. As if on cue, the ship's comms crackled to life. Captain Hayes' voice came through, clear and firm. Jace, Alira, we've just received a confirmation from the Earth Alliance. They've mobilized a fleet to help. They've been monitoring the Iliari for a while now, and they know what's at stake. Reinforcements will be here within hours. Jace couldn't help but smile. The battle had only just begun, but humanity was not backing down. They were answering the call, just as he and Alira had hoped. The stakes were higher than they had ever imagined, but now they had a chance. A real chance. Good, Jace said, his voice filled with determination. It's time to show the Iliari that humanity won't be silenced. Alira nodded, her expression one of quiet strength. We'll fight together, Jace. And this time, we'll win. Jace turned back to the window, looking out at the stars that had once seemed so distant, so impossible to reach. But now, they were within their grasp. Together, humanity and Alira had a chance to change the course of history. And as he stared out into the infinite unknown, he knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning. The war for humanity's future had started, and no one would stand in their way.